All right, thanks. So my name is Kalle. I come from Vendavo. I've been working with pricing last roughly 12 years, so that's pretty much my background in different roles at Vendavo. Before that, in let's say Finnish technological industry. And what I really like about pricing is that it touches so many functions in an organization. When you do pricing, you talk with sourcing people about your costs. You talk with sales about how do you actually get the prices to your customers. You talk with the human resources, how to get the best people to the pricing organization. So I feel it a really good place to be because you get to see the whole company. And especially today, we will focus on aftermarket pricing. And on top of arranging really great conferences, Copperberg also runs this aftermarket survey. I think there's probably plenty of people in the room today who has actually taken the survey and answered the questions. Well, I have been granted a sneak peek into the results that will be coming out, Lisa said, soon. And there was a couple of things that I found actually quite, let's say, alarming even, or kind of uh, not pessimistic, as Lisa was saying, as kind of sharing the same topics as 10 years ago, or was it 12 years ago. Here, what we can see is that if you think about pandemic, so I wanted to do a comparison, 2019 to this year. What's the share of revenue and profit coming from aftermarket in the organizations in the survey? And what we can see that actually the share of the companies where the share is in the lowest bracket from 0 to 29% has actually increased over the pandemic. So it seems that the service business have stagnated through the pandemic, which was a surprise to me. Of course, it can just mean that everyone's product business is booming, which would not be that bad news. But I think it's something for us collectively as the services experts here to think about that. It seems that we are even going a little bit backwards. And if not that, staying still. So how do we actually get back on the growth track? How do we make services more important in our organizations for the business? And that is, in my opinion, a good question, because here what I wanted to take a look at was also the how I see the traditional steps that a manufacturing or a company thinks about its service business. I think traditionally, or kind of, you start from the fact where you think about, well, services, aftermarket spare, well, it's not a real business. It's something we need to go and see the customer. We need to sell some spare parts to keep them quiet. But preferably, after we have sold whatever we're selling, we don't want to hear from them. We would be perfectly happy if we don't ever hear from them again. And I think there are still some companies like this out there. I actually have talked to a couple of them during this fall, and that has, I mean, the potential, the untapped potential in those companies are just huge. Then we have like the two middle ladders. I think those are where most of the companies really are at the moment. Where we have services, it's acknowledged that it's a real business. You can make money out of services. It's placed into its own organization, and it's run in parallel of the product business. And I think it was in the first presentation today, it was kind of a good like a development journey explained, that kind of coming from here, that now we actually have, it was I think Electrolux professional services or professional, where you have now the own VP for the services, and it's on the same level as all the other businesses, like really making the business. And I think the next thing is how do you then merge the services and the product into a solution? Because we in services, we talk a lot about solution business, but then our colleagues in the product business, sometimes they are not so keen on us giving them advice how to make the solution. And then of course, I think this is a future for many companies. When you think about these new business models, what we have heard also today, when you don't necessarily anymore sell anything physical, you sell a license to operate, or you sell the equipment to produce something. For example, you don't sell a refrigerator, you sell the cooling capacity. I think this is the stuff that I read on LinkedIn, less that I see in real life. Uh, but I think that's where at least some businesses are heading. But how can we get and what are the gaps? And this is also now from the latest survey, kind of asking from the same service professionals what is actually holding us back. What are the top 3 issues? Kind of on progressing the service business. Number 1, lack of understanding customer value drivers. Okay, makes sense. I think that's you are never too good at it. You never know your customer too well. There was actually one when I was in school. Actually, it's one of my teachers who told me that the kind of if you don't know the maiden name of or the spouse's maiden name of the CEI of your customer, you don't really know them. So I think then I think we can all say we probably don't know our customers. Then lack of internal alignment and conflicting internal strategies. I sort of lump those two together. It seems that there's still a lot of friction in our organizations. A lot of things, like again said, I think it was coming in the last presentation that okay, you need to get the funding. The decision is kind of those competing internal strategies. Do we invest in the aftermarket or do we invest in new product R&D? Where do we invest? What are those? Is there a clear strategy? And then internal alignment cooperation. I think that is holding us back in the solution business. Kind of how do we get the product teams, the R&D teams, and the services teams creating those solutions together? And well, if I would have the final answer how to get these 3 things solved, I think I would be happy. But I don't. But what I wanted to present today is kind of from a pricing perspective. I see that pricing can play a role in solving this. Probably it will not solve all of these issues, but it can solve some of it. I wanted to present 3 things that we can do about this from pricing perspective. How can pricing help this? I mean, main function for pricing is to make sure that you are always profitable, that you make good deals. But pricing can be used as basically a tool to drive some other goals as well. And to address these 3 challenges, what I want to present today is 3 pricing, let's say, topics that can be of use. And the first one will be what can we have in pricing function that can be used as a common rallying point for all of the functions for the whole organization. What common thing can we find and what common thing can we use to enhance that collaboration? Then especially I want to focus on how you can enhance the collaboration and connection between the pricing team and the sales teams. Because that's what I see in many organizations. You have a pricing team who's, for example, responsible for setting some list prices, but then you have sales teams who just get a list, product price, but they have no idea, okay, it's someone in some other office who makes the list and sends it over to me, and I'm the poor guy who needs to go with that to the customer. And I think that's something where I want to address specifically. And then as a third topic, ensuring that the pricing function is in the right place, because that's something that can really influence how you can benefit from the pricing activities and what are the main pricing activities that your team should be focused on. But let's start from number 1, how to find that common thing. And I'm boldly claiming that one thing that can be shared with all the functions in the world that can be hosted by the pricing team is what you could call a margin bridge or a price volume mix analysis. It's a really great thing that can have many names, but the idea is to, when you do this, that you understand that if you made 500,000 margin the previous quarter, but only 400k this quarter, where is that delta coming from? And then breaking down that delta into elements that each individual organization, function or team is responsible of. So think about volume. Well, this would be sales, right? How can sales drive more volume? What's happening? So, dear sales, what did happen there? Why did we lose volume? And kind of focus on that. Then price increases, price decreases. That's of course the pricing team. What's happening there? And then variable cost, fixed costs. That's where you get the sourcing people in. Fixed costs maybe your production teams, the HR teams. Everyone can have an their own, let's say, piece of the waterfall that they can call their own. And when you break this down by geography, by customer, by whatever element, it can be also assigned to different individual teams in the organization. So everyone should have basically something they own. And the pricing function could own the, let's say, the whole, the big picture of it, and then gather people around the analysis and share the responsibilities. Because I think this could be a way how you can have more fact-based discussions on what's happening with the volume, what's happening with your product mix. So you don't need to play the blame game, but really look at the numbers and understand what's happening behind those numbers, and then assign activities and tasks. And I think pricing function is in a perfect place to set something like this up. It doesn't matter how you do it, as long as you do it and start running it operatively. Then the other topic, how to really get pricing and sales together. Here, what I've seen, especially in the aftermarket, is that have been very much focused, especially in the spare part world, which from the history I know the best. We have been quite focused on, for example, improving value-based reference pricing for our spare parts. And that has exactly led to the situation. That's where we focus. And then we tend to think that, okay, now we have done my work in pricing, and then I just give the prices to our sales guys and off they go. And then the sales guys are muttering that, oh, how do I explain this, and how do I do this? And especially in services where the price should also, on top of the product, the value or the differentiation value always comes from availability and the service level you provide. It's never the product alone, in my opinion. So how to loop in the sales guy and the pricing team to create the right value differentiation. And I again make the bold claim that what you need to do with your pricing function, you need to get them involved in the daily life of sales. And one good way, in my opinion, of doing that is expand the remit of the pricing function to also look at the customer segment and customer specific pricing. Not only the product specific list pricing, but really going towards that, okay, what prices are the customers paying? And this really needs the continuous collaboration with the sales teams. And here, I think I want to link this to the main theme of today, which is the data. Because here we have seen many presentations where you have a lot of data and where you can nowadays gather a lot of data. And here you can be really smart. You can create really nice models to predict the customer willingness to pay based on the data. But even if you don't have that data, then still start with a simple approach, as long as you get your pricing team and the sales team at least talking about what is the right price for a specific customer segment or a customer. Getting that discussion and action going, that's the key. However you do it, you can get very sophisticated, but the important thing is to get started. Now then, the third piece, which was then linking the organization function of pricing to the right place. And this is a little bit more theory, but when we think about the development of the whole aftermarket services within an organization, usually how the pricing function starts is that, okay, we need someone to develop how the pricing works, because we have 500,000 spare part SKUs, and we have a mess of managing all of that. So the first thing that usually happens is that you go here, development coordination. You focus on how do we develop the way we do pricing, because we need to get the process under control. So that's where you focus on first. But then when you have all of that, and I think many organizations have already quite good pricing processes, they know what they're doing, that's not a really big thing anymore. So then it starts to become to think about, okay, where should the ownership of the pricing and decisions lie? And this is again the same thing. Could the pricing function take a little bit bigger role also on the operative side? How much they can support big sales deals, those customer segmentation criteria, and so on. So moving towards also owning at least some part of the operative pricing. Because I think then then you really make the best of what you are investing in a pricing team. Because let's say if you have a team of 3 or 5, it costs money, so you always need to get better and better return on that investment. So I think in aftermarket, moving along this axis a little bit here, depending on your culture, your status, probably makes sense. So those are the 3 things where I see kind of how you can level up your pricing team and your pricing function, how that can really work. And from a summary point of view, just what's needed to get there is you need to have shared objectives between your pricing team, between your sales teams. And it can also work the other way around, not so that the sales team should not only be measured by revenue they create, but also on profitability level or discount levels they need to give, because that is then again linking the incentives and the objectives together with the wider organization. But from a pricing, practically, what I would really recommend is we as pricing people, we need to get into the day-to-day operations of sales. Even if we wouldn't do that every day, we need to know how our sales teams work. Sometimes we should go and visit the customers together with them to understand the discussions they're having, because that's the way we can really understand some of the problems, and then we can be more creative on solving those problems. And this will then in turn create the more direct feedback loop between pricing and sales, and that's where you get the improved collaboration and in the end the improved results. And this really, what I want to end with is that the time to act is now. And why is that? I again looking at the real service experts who have taken the survey, and 56% of those are saying that there is at the moment more attention in the service business than in the previous year. So it seems that the management is really looking at the services business. We have some challenges, so it's a bit of maybe a scary moment. Our business may have not been developing so well, and there's a lot of attention. So what you need to do is, I would say, pick the most important improvement and start doing it. Take what you think will create the most improvement with the decent amount of what you need to put in it. Is it then time, resources, whatever, but make sure that you pick your most important goal and start going towards it. Because otherwise, I think we can lose this great moment where we have the management attention and there are like turbulence in the business, so we can really do something differently now quite easily. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kalle. Do we have any questions for Kalle? Questions? Oh, thank you.
Thank you for a great presentation. My question is, in the beginning of your presentation, you mentioned that you create at the headquarters, you create the prices and so on, and then you pass it on to the countries, to the branches to do their own pricing. At what level, what kind of understanding of the margin do they need? What kind of KPIs do they need? Do they need to understand the consolidated margin, or is it enough? What kind of driving or drivers they need to have in order to drive the prices and the business?
I think that's another, you could call it $1 million question. And what I have seen working with quite a few organizations, that there are like 2 schools of thought here. There's one school of thought who say that the frontline units or sales units, whatever you want to call them, they should have the visibility to the full contribution margin, because then they can make, let's say, informed decisions. And then I think then really the end-to-end margin should be the common goal if the company is, let's say, daring enough to share it with everyone, because I think that is truly the most transparent and kind of most fact-based way you can make decisions. But I also can understand that not all companies want to do it, because there are, like, if you share your core costs with just everyone in a big organization, you are taking on quite a bit of risk, right? So if you don't want to do that, then I would say there's a second school of thought who are then approaching this as kind of the KPI or the measurement then becomes how far do you deviate from a benchmark, which the benchmark is then usually a reference price or a list price. So you then define basically a corridor, perhaps that, okay, locally you should be within 20 or 25% from the benchmark. So you use the price and not the margin as your guiding measurement.
Any other questions?
Hi, Kalle, Richard here. Great presentation, very thought-provoking. I'm not a service leader, but a lot of people in the audience are, and I meet with lots of them. And what you've just talked about is a tool to achieve something most of them want, and that is to get a seat at the table of pricing. So could you share a couple of positive thoughts about how you've seen other service leaders achieve this goal, as in get themselves to the table and be part of the pricing conversation, and also share a couple of cautionary tales in terms of what you would be wary of to give them some level of guidance as to how perhaps to do that? Thank you.
Well, I think the best example really came from Electrolux already in the morning, that it needs to the organization needs to mature to consider first the services as a real business. I think that's a prerequisite for that to happen. And then I think where I see the switch practically happening is then I think you should really push for forming what you could call a pricing council, where you would then collect like the services leader, the product leader, probably the CFO or similar, who are then, and that group is then responsible for the most strategic pricing decisions, like okay, what is the share of customer value we want to get from the product versus from the services? And that really is a strategic decision that should come from such a pricing council. So I think those two steps, you need the leadership to acknowledge that it's a real business, and then I would say the pricing council is the best practice here. How to get that established? I think perseverance is probably my best advice. Talk about it until others give up.
Any final questions for Kalle?
So I have a question regarding the current environment that we're living in now, and how you see the pricing model changing with inflation going wild and raw material prices going up and down and everything, and how you deal with that more from retaining customers. You want to keep your margin as a company, right? And you want to push up prices with pretty short notice to customers. So how do you address that?
Well, I think there's one pitfall which I want to mention here, because what I've seen from many companies now is what they have many have done it, and many, I think even more, have thought about and wanting to do it, is to kind of go out and say that because our raw material, whatever costs have gone up, we need to increase prices. Well, that's all good now, but if I think about maybe 2 years in ahead, when the opposite happens, what do you do then? So I think that's something you need to keep in mind with this as well. So kind of if you justify all of your price changes based on your cost changes, it's great in one direction, not so great in the other direction. I think in this, when you have high inflation, and in B2B like high producer price changes, then I think the market share, at least what I've seen like last 2 years, the big market share shifts in the same market are more based on availability and your capability to serve the customers than pricing. Everyone is doing roughly the same price increases. Then it's if you can deliver, if you can simply give, for example, a spare part business, if you can deliver the parts, you are getting the business. So it's not only pricing here in this, I would say, I don't know, unique, but at least something that I haven't seen in my previous professional life.
Anyone else? No, okay. Kalle, a warm hand again for you. Thank you. And